Thank you for listening to this episode.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding @Prestigious_pod. And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousinitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website.
This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean. Today I have a very special guest returning to the show. He's the high-performance coach and entrepreneur, Daniel Hague. Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, man. Glad to be back.
So, Daniel, how have you been since last we spoke?
Yeah, I've been good. So the first couple of months after we spoke, I was on a little bit of a podcast tour. So I really just been around sharing my message, trying to say something that's of value to people. And then the last half of this year, I've been very much in the operations of my business, been in a little bit more of the nitty gritty of scaling that. And so, yeah, feeling good and things are moving forward.
Wonderful. And, why would somebody want to listen to today's episode?
So sometimes when we listen to podcasts, we want the little hacks that we can implement immediately and boost our productivity with 10%, with 20%. We can do these things that are very tangible for us. And I think we'll definitely have some of that in there. But also very often, how our business is performing, or how our careers are performing, how our health is performing, how we're performing as individuals is up to some a little bit more macro level things. And those high performance macro level things are the things that we'll be talking about today, which I believe if we dial those in, just about everything that matters in our lives will be easier, we'll perform better, we'll have more of the things that matter.
Right. So really that has to do with the energy and the way that we kind of show up to things. And that energy correlates to how we optimize for productivity. Am I kind of on the right track there?
Absolutely. So I'm a huge believer of energy being our number one currency, even ahead of time. And I, especially this year, have been really diving into to mastering that and helping clients with the energy optimization. So for anyone that's not sure what I mean, we spend a lot of time and energy with time management, right? We want to manage our time. We want to maximize how much are we getting out of our time. And I used to do that as well. For years, I wanted to just squeeze every single thing, every single ounce of productivity out of my second. And I saw this interview with a guy that seemed to be just larger than life. He was a huge executive. He had a wife. He had 4 children. He had hobbies, charity, everything. And they asked him, "How do you manage your time? You have so many things on your plate." And he said, "Time. That's the easy part. The tricky part is managing your energy. If you have the energy, you'll have the time." Now, I understand that there are people that are very busy. There are people that, such as yourself, there are parents and have things going on, right? So I understand busyness exists. I have found for myself and everyone I've ever worked with that if we have the energy, and I'll dive deeper into what I mean with that, we will find the time. So just in very general terms, the energy is, I divide it into physical energy, mental energy, and emotional energy. If we have those, we will get it done.
Right. Well, so that's interesting because, of course, we're all told everybody has the same amount of hours in the day. It just depends on how you use them. But if you don't have the energy level to be able to come at those hours with the things that you want to get done, then it's real hard to find the time. And it's not really time, it's energy, because you don't have the energy to go do those things. But a lot of times the verbiage that people use is, "I don't have the time to do that." But really, it's, "I don't have the energy to do that after XYZ ABC." So I guess my question is, how can we start to realize that the energy is the lowest common denominator? Like that is the thing that's holding us back from being able to do whatever it is that we're looking to accomplish.
Right. So one of the first steps is we can go about it the logical way, which is we simply look at how are we spending our time. And in almost no cases is the time fully maximized. So when I'm talking to a client, I might say something like, how much, they'll say something like, "Oh, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that." And then I'll ask them, "How much wasteful time did you have? Like, how much time did you actually waste?" And he'll say, "Oh, well, I spend 2 hours a day playing chess on my phone. I spend probably 4 hours scrolling, and maybe about 3 hours on language learning on YouTube because I find it funny. I'm like, okay, so that's a pretty big handful of hours. Why are we wasting so much time? And he's like, oh, well, because I need to rest, or because, well, I'm exhausted, or I get fatigued if I don't have those escapism breaks, or because the way I'm working throughout the day, it's overwhelming, or it drains my mental energy. So a lot of people will say they don't have time, but then the reason they don't have time is because maybe they're 3 hours on their phones, not because they're lazy, not because they're bad people, not because they're stupid, not because of any of that, but because for some reason they feel like they need it, right?
Mhm.
And we can talk about dopamine, we can talk about all those things as well, but a lot of it is just simply I'm exhausted, and so I need to rest for 3 hours, and because of that, you don't have the time. So that's I remember a personal story. A few years ago, I've had that feeling of I never have time. I don't have enough time for all the things I want to do. And for fun, I went to my phone and I looked at social media usage. Snapchat alone, in 1 week, I had spent 22 hours.
Hmm.
And I was like, I am never again going to tell my family I'm too busy to see them. I'm never again going to tell myself that I'm too busy to go to the gym. I'm never again going to tell myself that I'm too busy for anything as long as I'm spending 22 hours per week on Snapchat. Right. But then obviously some deep work followed where I had to understand why am I spending that much time on Snapchat and then fixing that, which is really valuable work. And it's tough work, but it's valuable work and it's worth it. So yeah, that would be the first step. It's just basically logically looking at how much time am I wasting because I'm not feeling how I could be feeling.
Now, okay, so what would be some key indicators that somebody would be feeling if energy was the thing that was was actually the lowest common denominator? Like if I feel like I see I'm spending multiple hours on social media and I'm missing out on these things. Okay, but how do I know what are the things to look for for me to internalize that as I am low on energy right now?
Right. So in very overall general terms, I would say if you feel like things are too overwhelming, sometimes I've had such depleted energy levels where it's like if you told me to do 10 push-ups or you told me to do 10 plus 10 in my head, I would almost get dizzy or I would feel like "Phew, I cannot have even though it's a very simple small task, I cannot have any more on my plate right now. I'm overwhelmed. That's very often a feeling of there's one of your kind of energy levels, whether it's physical or emotional, whatever that's depleted. I think a lack of energy shows itself differently if it's physical energy that we're lacking versus mental versus emotional. So I think to really talk about the symptoms and also of course the fixes and stuff like that, I think it makes sense to go for maybe one of those at a time. And so yeah, I mean for emotional energy would be things like you're very quick to get irritated, you're very quick to be like sad or angry, or you feel like everything is hopeless, you feel like everything is, you're very annoyed with your team, with your clients, with your employees. You have a very like short, like you're, I think we all know how it feels like to be emotionally uh, overstimulated or just depleted for energy. And actually, when you talk to doctors and psychologists and stuff like that, um, and they make these lists for the things that will produce the highest likelihood of you being sick with stress. It's a lot of it is emotional. If in fact all of it is emotional, it's things like the death of a spouse. It's moving to another city. It's moving jobs. It's all these things. So suddenly emotional energy, you'll feel it, and that's pretty powerful. It's going to have an impact in your day to day. Physical energy, I mean, you'll feel more tired, you'll feel more like, I just want to nap constantly. I certainly don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to go to the store to go for groceries. Um, the very classical, I'm physically tired slash exhausted. Some people feel like that almost the entire day. And everything becomes harder when you feel like that. You'll see more in things like procrastination and stuff like that. So if I'm working on, let's say I'm writing a new ebook, and I constantly I'm like, I want to check my phone. I want to do something else. I'm seeking escapism. I'm seeking um, procrastination. I'm delaying. Uh, that's a sign that we're not really, you know, we don't have the mental energy that we need. And so, if you're lacking one of these, it will show on our performance, on our moods, on how, our leadership, our productivity, all these things. But a lot of people will be lacking two or three of them, and then obviously they'll stack, right? So if you're emotionally stressed, but you're also mentally fatigued and you're like physically exhausted, it's and then it's a obviously it's a negative spiral because then if you feel that way, you're probably not going to get to the gym, and if you're not going to the gym, you might not eat as healthy as you would have otherwise. If you don't eat healthy, might not sleep as well, and it becomes a very negative spiral, obviously. So,
Yeah, and okay, so you talked about stress there, and it's
hmm
interesting because it seems like when people get overstressed is when their ability to cope with whatever it is that they have going on gets out of balance with the things they have. Like when they run out of coping mechanisms to deal with the things that are in front of them, that's when they get overstressed. And physical, emotional, and mental energies. What are some things that we can do to replenish those? Are there different things for each category, or is there one kind of over thing, or does it depend on person to person?
yeah, I would definitely say there are different things for each of the three, but some of them will go again. So, like in terms of physical energy, I would talk about things like sleep, right? But obviously, sleep will have a very positive effect on the mental and emotion as well. So some of the things go again, but I would like to still separate them up. And I think for physical energy, it's a lot of the I wouldn't call it no-brainer stuff, but it's a lot of the stuff where we know it. We just need to kind of remind ourselves how important it is. So that's stuff like sleep, right? Not necessarily quantity, but we need the deep sleep, we need the REM sleep, we need those, and um, and that's going to make a very big difference. And fortunately, it's something that we can work on and fix quite quickly. I know people will have, there are people who have actual sleep issues, but one or two good nights of sleep, we can very quickly pay back some of that sleep debt. Whereas if it's, some of the things we'll talk about in terms of emotional energy, some of that, takes years to build up, or to deplete, I should say. So it takes a little bit longer to get back up again. But the physical energy, a lot of that we can that's kind of the low hanging fruit, right? Because and same thing with hydration. You can have messed up your hydration for a long time, but you can start today being fully hydrated and eating well, exercising, all these things we can kind of dive deeper into with a lot more detail, right? So for exercising, I like there to be some resistance training. I like there to be some cardio. I like there to be some mobility, flexibility, central nervous system training. I like a bunch of stuff there. So that's almost a little bit of a science in of itself. But overall, the physical things we kind of know what we need to do. We're just not always remembering how important they are. In terms of mental energy, there's a lot of stuff we can do. And this is actually one of the main things I've been shifting towards helping people with and helping especially business owners with is how do I work? Right. So not so much what should you work on. There are great business coaches and consultants and all that out there, but how do you work? And so with that, I mean things like workflows. I mean things like what are your priority hierarchies? Do you know exactly what to work on, when, how, with whom, etc.? And the reason these things are important is, well, there are many reasons. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're a freelancer, even if you're in a job, there are oftentimes a billion things we can work on. And if there's overwhelm, if there's a lack of clarity, if there's doubt, if there's fear, if there's these things, that's going to drain us. I think we've all tried both cases. We've tried working on something, we're not quite sure how should it get done. I'm a little bit insecure about it. I'm not sure if I'm good enough. I'm not sure if I'm going about it correctly. I'm not sure about a bunch of variables. And we've all tried working on something where we just know exactly what we need to do and how and when and why and with whom and for whom and etc. Um, so to make a list of things that would be beneficial for our mental energy, it is things like being very clear about what we do, when, and how. So I like workflows. Every second of every workday, I know what I should be working on because I know when I've done this thing, I know this is the next priority. And when that happens, then this is the next priority. And so I just know what's going to happen. I have some team members where initially when I hired them, they would be working, quote unquote, for a lot of hours, but nothing would really happen. And when I asked them why, they would basically be unclear about what they were supposed to be working on. That's just the ultimate productivity crusher, but it's also going to drain you mentally. So whether it's putting systems in place or it's a workflow, or I call them priority hierarchies, where it's like I'll do this until a certain point, and then I'll do this until a certain point, and then I'll put that stuff in place. It will have a massive impact, for sure. And once again, all of that we can kind of dive deeper into if we want to. But right now, I just want to give a very like overall general view of what energy is, how it works, what the impact is, but also the knobs we can kind of turn and the levers we can pull. For emotional energy, it's actually back to a lot of what we talked about on the first episode, which is one of the things we can work on in terms of emotional energy is, are we aligned with our values? Now, some people might start thinking this is a little bit hocus pocus, this is a little bit too woo woo, but I promise it's going to be very practical. It's going to be very tangible. So an example is, let's say one of your main values is freedom, and then I dive deeper into what that means for you. So, okay, when you say freedom, you said you started your business for freedom. Was that for location freedom? Was it time freedom? Was it financial freedom? Was it freedom to make decisions in your day to day? What was it? And the person will say, the main thing was freedom of location. And then I'll look at him and I'll say, okay, but you've built a company that requires you to be in the office 70 hours a week, right? So you're actively building the opposite of what matters most to you. You're actively building a kind of a jail cell almost, which then it makes sense why you're pissed off at your team and your employees, because they're actively working on taking away your location freedom, right? Because the bigger the business gets, the less you have of the thing you want. You're pissed at your customers, your clients, because the more you have of those, the less location freedom you have, right? So then it becomes basically the business becomes the opposite. And this doesn't have to be a business, it can be a job as well. Becomes the opposite of why you started that career, but also the opposite of what fills you up, right? The opposite of what excites you, the opposite of what makes you, jump out of bed in the morning. And so if we have too many things like that, where maybe the main four values that I have in life, my business is crushing all four, that's going to make me deplete my emotional energy levels instead of filling them up. And that's going to make me more irritated. It's going to make me just in every way a lesser version of myself. So one of the main things in terms of emotional energy levels is to align your business, your career, your day to day with with your strengths, with your weaknesses, with the things that you believe in. And once again, can dive deeper into what that means and how we do it, etc. But that's the gist of it.
Okay, so I want to go back a little bit. Your big question that you asked was, how do I work? And I want to kind of underline that a little bit, because I think that how do I work, coupled with workflows and those productivity hierarchies, you lump all of those together, and that sets the stage for always having an answer to the question, what do I do next? And I think the through line for that is to have a standard or a set of standard operating procedures for you or your team or whoever to follow. Because once you have those, and the hard part, so if you're the business owner, the hard part is thinking, oh man, I have all of this stuff to do now because I had to build these standing operating procedures so that everybody knows what to do. But if you don't have those, then everybody's always asking, well, what do I do next? How do I do this? And it's never done the same way. And everybody's always confused. There's that clarity piece isn't there because they don't know what the line looks like. But when you have those standard operating procedures, and as the business owner, I would highly advise you, the business owner, not to be the one to do those. You allow the people who are doing the job on a day-to-day, them to fit that, to kind of write the road down for you, or for them really to follow. You can be there, you can kind of pull some strings a little bit to guide, but really the business owner is going to be there. Hey, listen, I know that you do this every day. I'm sure that you have a system, a flow that you get through to do this procedure.
Mhm.
Tell me, what does that look like? Let's write this down together so that we can do this. That way, when you move up to the next position, because I know that, of course, that's what you want to do. When you move up to the next position, that person that comes in next already knows how to do that. And you don't have to mess with them and try to teach them how to do it, because we're going to do it now. And then it's set forever. We'll just have to go in and tweak and little small adjustments as time goes, but it's all going to be there. So if somebody hears that and they're like, oh, the SOPs, I don't want to listen, it's really not as hard as you think it might be. Really, SOPs are so helpful. And I think that, and Daniel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that really is that workflow, and that really is the productivity hierarchy. Like, you can have a list of things. Okay, this is most important. This is most important. This is most important. They can't all be most important. You have something that is the most important. That's number one. And then everything else has to fill in somewhere below that. And you might be working on the most important thing at the moment, but then something else comes in that's actually more important. Then you need to pause that, go to the most important thing, the most important thing in the moment right now. Do that before you move to the next thing. So I think that asking that question, how do I work? And maybe an alternate question is not only how do I work, how does my business work? How do I work within my business? And how do my employees work for me within my business? Because I think that all of those are kind of coupled together. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love everything you just said, especially about the SOPs and also about the team kind of transcending their own role. I have that already in my business right now. I have someone that's been doing a lot of appointment setting and stuff like that for me, and he will eventually he's moving up to more of a marketing kind of director manager thing, and then he's actually going to hire and train the people that will do what he's been doing for me until now. And so a perfect example of what you said. I love SOPs, absolutely. So what I do with SOPs is I kind of stack them a little bit. So I combine them with kind of like a workflow. And so when I say workflow, here's an example, because another thing you said that I love is there's one thing that's the highest priority, right? So especially in business, there are a gazillion things I could work on right now. I could look at my business and I could say, would I look at, would I work on my lead flow today? Maybe getting more leads, maybe getting better quality leads. Maybe I'll work on our sales process. Maybe I'll work on fulfillment, on whatever it might be. And even within all of those things, there are a gazillion ways that I could work on it, right? So, but there's only one thing that's really truly the one thing. And that one thing doesn't have to be the one thing forever. Because as I say this, there's one thing that's more important than everything else. People might say, well, so I would just be doing that same thing over and over again. Maybe, maybe not, right? So an example I like to use is when you're flipping a light switch. You want to turn on the light in your apartment or your room, whatever it is. When you flip the light switch, there's light. You don't need to flip it again. You don't need to flip it 10 times. You don't need to flip it 100 times. There's a diminishing return. There's light the first time. So once you've done that, something else becomes the next best thing you could do, or the best thing you could do. And it's the same thing with me in my business. It might be, I'll do all of the sales calls today, but eventually there are no more sales calls. So then something else is the main thing, which might be I'll make sure I have content ready for every day for the next week. But eventually that's done, right? And then it kind of becomes obvious that okay, this is the first priority until that thing. And then for this thing, right? This thing that's the first priority right now, I'll have kind of an SOP for that. So I will show my team maybe a video or maybe just a kind of like a walk down of this is how we do task number one, right? And we do task number one until this happens. Once this happens, then we do task number two. I also have an SOP for every single thing we need to get done, which is useful for me and it's useful for the team. So I think the more clarity you can have on these things, the more you and your team will perform, because there's going to be less procrastination, less overwhelm. There's going to be more productivity. You're going to have a better opportunity for improvement, right? So if today I'm doing X and tomorrow I'm doing Y, and in 3 days maybe I'll try C, maybe I'll try that, maybe I'll try that. It's very difficult to have that kind of feedback loop. So when we look at people like the NBA champions, right, they do the same thing a billion times and they get just a tiny bit better every time they do it, to get that kind of feedback loop, consistent feedback loop over time, it's really good to have some kind of system that we can do over and over again. So that means that if I go through my workflow today and then tomorrow I have a similar workflow, that means I can do it a little bit faster tomorrow. I can do it a little bit better. Because today, when I did task number 4, I noticed that I wasted a little bit too much time doing that because of this tech issue, or whatever it might be. And then tomorrow, that's not going to be there because I'll fix it. So I'm going to get faster through the workflow. I'm going to do it better. So that's another thing that's very important in terms of having these workflows, having these systems, is that we can't really practice doing it unless it's like a pretty clear thing. So many advantages to having systems like that and clarity in general on how we work.
So if somebody is struggling their own role or the roles of the team members that they have, and then so two-part question. One, if they're having struggle trying to find that clarity, and they want to have some sort of this standard operating procedure, this workflow that we're talking about, what are some steps that they can do so they can start building their own for that? Hey everyone, it's Chris Bean here from the Prestigious Initiative. If you're looking to level up your life and unlock your full potential, I've got some exciting news for you. My recent guest, Joel Gandara, has an incredible program called 31 Days to Become a Better Man. Joel has packed years of life-changing insights into this easy-to-read book, guaranteed to help you rethink your shortcomings and redefine what it means to be a man in today's world. But that's not all. Joel also offers powerful one-on-one sessions and group classes to guide you on your journey. And he has a special offer for the Prestigious Initiative listeners. You can get $19.99 off the program when you use code PRESTIGIOUS at checkout. Don't wait. Take your first steps towards becoming the best version of yourself today. Visit 31dailychallenges.com and use the code PRESTIGIOUS for your discount. And now back to the show.
Absolutely. So I'll give you 2 ways we can go about it. One I use for myself, and one I use maybe a little bit more for the team. But both are pretty valuable and has really changed how I prioritize my work. The first one is I scout for bottlenecks, which means in the example I gave you before, I can work on my content, on my traffic generation, on my paid ads, on my email. I can work on so many things. So how do I pick? Well, the first thing I do is which of these parts of my business is currently the bottleneck, right? So if you're brand new in business, very often you'll basically go from the left and then one step at a time, right? At first you have no traffic, and then once you have traffic, now your problem is it's not converting. And then once it starts to convert to opt-ins and no one is buying, then that's your problem, right? Now people start buying, then now you need them to buy more. Or so if you're brand new in a business, it would basically be from the left. But if you've been in business for a while, you can kind of look at where is it in my business, in my process, and that might be for a job as well, for however you work. There's a bottleneck in what you do. There's something that's not just the weakest link, but it's for sure the part of the business where if you improve that's going to have the highest kind of reward per effort ratio, and I know we'll talk about that later. I think that would be pretty cool, at least. So anyway, let's say that to me is okay. In my overall business, what's the bottleneck? I might say, that is my lack of personal brand. I've gotten decent at making ads. I've gotten decent at making products that people want. The thing that the objection that I often get is, okay, Daniel, if I'm looking to work with you and you're going to be my coach, whatever, why don't you have a social media presence, or why don't you have a bigger social media? And so that's probably the main objection I get. And so I realized, okay, for me now, maybe that's my number one issue. So then that's what I'm working on. And then I dive deeper and I say, okay, what could I do for my personal brand? There are many things I could do, right? I like to use this example. I could tell my mother to go tell her friends about my personal brand. Technically, it would help my personal brand. Maybe not a lot. Maybe that's 2 followers. I could write a sign right? Where it says, follow me at blah, 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 and go to the street and say, and hold that for the entire day. Maybe I'll get a few followers. So technically, and we're going to get back to this because it's a trap a lot of, well, not just entrepreneurs, but everyone will fall into, is they'll ask, is this productive or not? Is this valuable or not? Is this helpful or not? And the answer to those questions would be yes, in all of the examples I just gave. But it wouldn't be the most valuable. It wouldn't be the most productive thing I could do to solve my personal brand issue, right? And so I would identify what is it that I can do what's the number one thing I can do to alleviate the number one bottleneck, which I've identified as making content and getting on podcasts. So that's what I'm focusing on. Yeah, and I'll focus on that once again the new year. But anyway, to answer your question, I don't consider it working unless I'm doing the number one thing that alleviates the number one bottleneck I have. And you can use this in business, but technically you can use it in life as well, just for more general things. So that's kind of the thing I use. I just really always look at bottlenecks. The second thing is, and I probably do that more with the team, is I'll just ask myself if this person could only do one thing, right? So if I hire someone to do some social media stuff and he manages the content, he manages the inbox, and he does this and that and that. If I could only have him do one thing, what would that be? And then once I've identified that one thing, which means that's the most valuable thing, right? That's the highest priority. I'll ask myself, for how long is that the highest priority? So let's say I identify this social media person, and his task is, or I identify his most important task as being in the inbox and talking to people that are interested. At first, he'll talk to people that literally say, I'm ready to buy. After that, he'll prioritize the ones that maybe in the last week showed interest. After that, maybe he'll reach out to people that like my content. After that, he will, and eventually he's going to get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm going to do cold outreach to just whatever, and then the outreach might have lower value. So then something else becomes higher value, right?
So I
yeah.
want to dive in a little bit and talk about two kind of areas, and we can go into the first one here first, which is how to know what to prioritize. When we talk about bottlenecks there, yes, but if I am not the owner of the job, if I'm the employee of the job, or if I'm the owner of the job, the owner of if I'm the entrepreneur and I want to help my employees prioritize the work that they have to do, how do I do that in such a way that is beneficial to the business without sort of boxing in my employees to do very limited things, even though they're capable or can do lots of things. And so I want to talk about that first, and then I want to talk about that reward per effort ratio. So we'll do prioritization first, though.
Yeah. So obviously it is people that we are working with. It's not robots. It is people, and we want to be a team. And I always try to be a little bit more of I always try to be just as much of service to my team as they are to the business, etc., etc. So I certainly don't want anyone to feel like they're in a box. I don't want anyone to feel like they, will get bored of their work or anything like that. And oftentimes also I might have an idea of what's highest priority, and then the person who's in that role every day has an idea of something that's even more valuable, right? Or an even better way of doing it. So I certainly welcome that, absolutely. I do think I will probably have difficulties telling my team to do something that I know to be less valuable for the business, uh, just for the sake of uh, like keeping variation in there or whatever. I would rather, in the position, when I kind of make the position, I'd rather be very clear about what that job entails, and then they'll be pleasantly surprised when there's more variation.
I think,
versus the opposite.
sorry, but I think that's it. That's it, right? So a lot of times the entrepreneurs, these business owners, they're trying to figure things out as they go. And they see other people, they have a secretary. Oh, I have to have a secretary. Okay, great. Now I have a secretary. Oh, I need somebody to work the front desk. Okay, great. Let's work the front desk. But you don't actually know, as the employee, the entrepreneur, you don't really know what you want those employees to do. And until you are clear about why you hired, well, I guess, okay, why you hired that person over the other candidates that you have, but over that, why you have that position available at your business and what specific role you want that person to fulfill on. Until you have that, they can't do that, right? You have to have, like, whoever is leading the charge in the business, the manager, however your business works, that person needs to be very clear on what the other people are doing, and so much so that they are clear on what they're doing, right? And this concept has come up a number of times now, but you want to be able to know your job so well that you can explain it to a 3 or 4-year-old so that they can understand it. Because if you know your job to that finite little detailed image that you can explain to somebody who is very small and doesn't have a real big grasp on what to do, you can't show up one day and, okay, today I'm answering the phones and tomorrow I'm going to clean the toilets and then the next day I'm going to write a copy for the website. You can't do all that, right? You have to have a very relatively rigid way of looking at, okay, this little box is my job. And I know inside of these 4 walls, I know everything that I have to do. And I know all the parts that I know I can walk through it blind. You have to know what that job looks like. And until you know what that job looks like, as the entrepreneur, you shouldn't be hiring those people. Because otherwise, you're just filling positions to fill positions. They don't know what to do. It's a wild waste of time and energy for you and for them and for the business in general. So be very clear, very specific on how and why you're doing. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think that really was like the key for all that whole kind of concept there.
I'm glad you interrupted, because that was gold. Very strong observation. I 100% believe, and I'm actually going to pull this out to even like bigger overall things, not just business, but I believe exactly what you said is that the problem should come first, right? So I should have a problem in my business, and then because of that problem, I'm going to hire someone to solve it. I absolutely see it, just like you said. Someone hires an assistant, someone hires this or that, and then afterwards we have to find something of value for this person to do, which is, I honestly think, pretty unfair to the person we hired as well. So I think the problem comes first, which means I start having an overflowing inbox on Facebook, on Instagram, etc. And so I hire someone to manage that. I struggle with sending what's that called in English? Basically letters or emails or whatever to podcast hosts such as yourself, because I have to do so many blah 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 blah. Okay, then I hire an assistant. I struggle with this thing. I have so many sales calls. I can't have 8 sales calls per day and still do everything else. So now I'll hire a salesperson. Right? That's awesome. And I think that's and now I'm so excited about that point that I'm going to pull it out even further. I think for life in general, it should be like that. Right? I see so many people, they will maybe they'll and I'm not bashing on anyone or anything like that. I'm just saying I notice a lot of people will go maybe and get a degree or something, and then they'll see if maybe afterwards I can find something of value to do with that degree, which sometimes you can, right? If you're an engineer or something like that, maybe you'll have good luck with that. Other people struggle with it. I like to go the reverse and go, okay, what is it that I'm trying to do? What kind of job is it that I want to get into? Okay, this job, then I need this degree. Or, just even books. I have a huge bookshelf of personal development books. I used to just devour anything and everything, every book I could find. Now I'm once again more solution oriented, where I'm like, okay, what is it I'm actually working on? Is it my self-worth? Is it my habits? Is it my psychology around money? But what is it that is actually holding me back? And then I go buy a book that solves that problem. I think that's something I've changed about my approach to business and to life the last maybe 3 or 4 years. Instead of just devouring or hiring or whatever, and then trying to squeeze value out of that. Great point. And then I think if I'm hiring someone and the job position is, look, man, it's not glamorous, it's inbox management full time, and there's going to be freedom, and you can work from wherever, and you can have blah 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 blah. But that's what the job entails, right? And then he says yes, and then we see that I also need someone to help me manage my Facebook group or whatever it is. And then, he can kind of help with that as well. So in that sense, his role at the firm grows until eventually he'll be like some kind of, marketing manager, etc. And but it grows because of a need. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, good observation.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of that reward per effort ratio that you mentioned. What is that? How can we apply that to our lives, either as our own personal lives or even entrepreneurs? And I know a lot of times that if an entrepreneur's outside the business life is kind of crumbling and falling apart, then oftentimes the actual business crumbles and falls apart. So I know that those things kind of go hand in hand. So with that kind of in mind, what is the reward per effort ratio? How can we apply that? What is it?
Right. So when I present the reward per effort ratio, I am fairly certain that a lot of people will say, obviously, Daniel, but sometimes new information is not what we need. Sometimes it's a reminder. And here comes a reminder of a reward per effort ratio. So everything I do in my life, I kind of look at what's the reward per effort ratio of this specific task. So reward could be a bunch of things. Could be growth in my career. It could be, and health improvement. Could be my social life improving. My overall quality of life improving. Me hitting my goals. Me hitting my achievements, etc. That's reward. And effort is time that you invest, or it's energy that you invest. It's money that you invest. It's sacrifices that you make. So basically, we have a calculation that says how much am I putting in versus how much am I putting out or getting out. That's a very, very basic concept in terms of investing and business and stuff like that, right? If you're running an ad campaign, you put $10 in ads, and I made 13 back, right? But I do it for basically everything. So it's not always easy identifying which activity has the highest reward per effort ratio. But I'll try and give a few examples here. For example, if I wanted to improve my cardiovascular health, I want to improve my heart. There are a bunch of studies that say even just a few minutes of very high intensity cardiovascular training, maybe 2 or 3 times per week, will have similar effects, if not the same effect, than maybe walking for hours and hours, or even running. And I'm not a science, as a sports scientist, but it's an example of if I can get the same result in 3 minutes that with other approaches take me 3 hours per week, I'm interested in the 3 minute one, right? And same thing for business. I gave you a few examples before of things that I could do that would grow my personal brand. I could spend 10 hours tomorrow in the city with a sign that said follow me on Instagram, and that would be a lot of effort. It would take 10 hours. It would be freezing cold here in Denmark in December. It's really, really cold and it's dark, and it'd be a lot of effort, and the rewards wouldn't be huge, right? They wouldn't. So I would rather, okay, what's something where I can get a higher return on my investment of time or investment of energy or investment of, and it's not always obvious what the main thing is. That's where you can hire a coach. You can hire, especially like someone who's specifically a coach for you. So if you want to actually get good at the piano, there are some things that you can do that will get you, make you better faster, and the piano coach will know those things. But so it's not always obvious, but very often it is. And shoot, I was gonna give a really good example and I forgot it. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Well,
Yeah, I remember what I wanted to say. And that was, we sometimes trick ourselves into thinking, and I did this for years, if it's valuable, then it's the right thing I'm doing. If it's productive, then it's the right thing I'm doing. If it's actually moving me forward, then it's the right thing I'm doing. So what I would be doing in my business when I was working, quote unquote, was, if I was reading an article about 20 productivity hacks, I felt like I was working on my business. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with listening to productivity hacks. That's kind of what we're doing here, but I thought it was working on my business. If I was reading an email about marketing, I thought I was working on my business, and technically I was, right? Because I learned a little bit about, some kind of marketing. Anything that I, in any way, shape, or form, could correlate or could relate to growth in my business, I felt like that was the right thing to do. Even though there might have been something that was 500 times more valuable that would have cost the same time or the same energy or the same money. So that's why the reward per effort ratio is a powerful thing to ask ourselves when we do something. Could there be something where there's a higher reward per effort ratio for this thing I'm trying to achieve?
Okay, so one thing that you said that really resonates with me is kind of that synergy between personal health and business success. So how can entrepreneurs better integrate their own personal health routines into their business life and help to create and build and continue that momentum, that synergy thereafter?
So the very first thing I just want to get clear is that um, there's no such thing as not enough time. And I know I'm going to get very basic people coming after me with pitchforks, but I read an article about Barack Obama doing his entire presidency, but also doing his presidential campaign, which keep in mind, in under a presidential campaign, every single 5 minute slot is booked from the second you wake up till the second you go to bed. It's quite literally the busiest you can be as a human being. He told his advisors, he told his team, he told his family, he told everyone, I need an hour in the morning to work out. Give me that hour, and I will be better in every way for the rest of the day, but I need that hour. And he did it. And to my understanding, he did it every day. And so I always remind myself that if people that literally rule the world can find an hour per day, then I'm not too busy. I might have days where it's not possible if there's a lot of traveling or whatever, but it is possible for me as well. I'm not more important than the president of the US. And so it is possible. The next thing I would advise people to do is what I have found with many things in life, and especially with physical health, is I have found that the first 95% of something are as rewarding as the last 5%. No, sorry. The first 95% of something takes the same amount of effort as the last 5%, but they're way more rewarding. So what I mean by that is if someone does the very basics of eating, right? So we cut out, the majority of the fast food. We don't eat too much sugar. We don't maybe smoke every day or drink alcohol every day. We eat, a decent amount of protein. We get some veggies. We get some, we just eat like basically clean. We don't eat perfect at all. We just eat like basic healthy diet. I feel like the benefits from going from the standard American diet to going to like a basic healthy diet, the benefits from that are just completely out of this world. You're going to feel like you're on a different planet. Whereas the difference between going from a basic healthy diet to being one of those, which once again, I'm not bashing, I follow most of them, but being like many of these biohackers where it's like you have to have 32 milligrams of this Kenyan root because there's like a point something percent improvement on your enzyme that does this. I personally I have no data to back this up. Nothing. It's just my personal understanding of things is that going from the American kind of pretty terrible diet to going to a basic healthy diet, all of the benefits almost come from that. The first like 95% of the benefits come from that. And then if you really want to squeeze out the last 5%, let's say you want to be like the top biohacker, you want to be Mr. Olympia or whatever, those last 5% take about as much effort, if not even more effort, to compared to the first 95. And this goes for your sleep, right? Getting like decent sleep, doing the basics of not eating a few hours before bed. It's a dark room, it's silent, it's maybe a little bit cold. It's you do something relaxing the last hour before you go to bed. These very basics will just completely transform your sleep. And then the super try hard like extra things I don't always find to be necessary. You can do it if you want, but they're not as beneficial. Once again, there's not a high reward per effort ratio at that time. There's diminishing returns on your effort. So anyway, to answer your question, my advice is do the basics of all of it. So instead of going all in on having the most perfect diet in the world, have a decent diet, have basic good sleep, have some exercise, a little bit of resistance training, a little bit of cardio, nothing fancy or crazy, especially in the beginning. Um, Take care of your stress levels, make sure you breathe once in a while, and just that's going to be the majority of the benefits. And then you can, with time, you can go a little bit more try hard and squeeze out the last couple of percentages for one or two or three or whatever of those things.
So, Daniel, I know you talked about the importance of tracking. And with the concept of energy, is there a kind of a protocol, workflow, a standard operating procedure that you would recommend for somebody to follow to track their energy, their mood, perhaps through the given day, through the week? And if so, what would something like that look like?
Right. So, in terms of tracking, I mean, I have my my Aura ring. I track my sleep. I would very much like to try just for a while, try tracking my blood sugar just to really understand, what foods have which effect, stuff like that. But if we're just going a little bit more basic, I think it's just being curious about yourself and how you feel, right? So when you wake up, ask yourself, you know, how well did I sleep? Okay, how well do I feel like I slept? And then what I do for a lot of things is I look for patterns. So I encourage every listener of this podcast to look for patterns. In terms of your physical health, that's an example, right? So when are you fatigued? When do you feel unstoppable? What you'll notice is someday it's gonna hit you and you'll say, wait, I just noticed the last 13 Saturdays I felt amazing, but the last 8 Mondays or the last, you know, 7 out of the 9 Wednesdays I felt terrible. Why is that? Well, actually, usually on Tuesdays I have that thing, so I go to bed late, and that's why I feel terrible on Wednesdays or whatever it might be. It's really really cool. You can also do it for your days, right? It's like, okay, I always feel great at 10 a.m. I feel amazing, but I always feel sluggish and tired at 2 p.m. Why is that, right? What do I eat an hour before I start feeling sluggish, etc., etc.? Be curious, and the same thing with your business, with your work. When you procrastinate, be very curious about yourself. Ask yourself, are there certain days where I procrastinate more than others? Are there certain times during the day? Are there certain projects where I always crush it? And then maybe there are some projects where I always procrastinate. Are there certain people when I work with them, I'm always more drained when I come home than when I'm working with these people? So be very curious about yourself, be curious about how you feel, and be curious about you feel why you feel. Not You don't have to be like fanatical about it because that can make you a little bit crazy, but just have an understanding of if there are any patterns going on, which there always are.
Right. And I think the key thing for those patterns is once you start to learn how you will act in these different situations, you can start to see these patterns. And then what you can pull from there is you can predict perhaps what will happen next. And then with that, then you can predict how you will feel about whatever it is that's happening later. And then what you have there is a catalog, right? You have a database of if I do this, I will feel this later. Or if I see that this is coming up in the future, I know afterwards I'm going to feel like this. So I need to do something on the front end to kind of get my momentum up, to get my build my energy before I get to that thing that I know is going to crush me before. And so looking for those patterns, I think is really key. And Daniel, I want to say, as we're wrapping up here, for our listeners who wanted to implement some of your advice right away, what are 3 actions that they can take, maybe even today, to start to optimize their energy and their productivity?
Absolutely. So for the energy, well, actually, the answer is pretty much the same for both things. For energy, I would challenge every listener to identify what their bottleneck is right now. So first of all, I would challenge them to say, what's holding me back the most right now? Is it mental, physically, or emotional energy? Which one of those 3 is kind of my bottleneck? What's holding me back? Might be more of them. That's not up to par, but which one is the main one that you would like to improve upon? And then see if you can scout for the reason for why that's depleted, right? Really look for what's the bottleneck, what's holding me back emotionally, what's holding me back in terms of physical energy, etc. Once you have that clarity, I think the next steps forward would be quite evident, or they'd be quite obvious, right? So if you identify that the main thing that's holding you back right now is physical energy, and the main reason for that is because of your sleep, and the main reason your sleep is deficient is because you go to bed an hour too late at night. Maybe the solution, or at least the direction you could be moving in, becomes a little it's basically laid out for you. And I think the same thing with productivity. I would ask yourself, first of all, I would ask yourself, is your issue with productivity that you're not working on things you should be working on as much as you should be working on them? Right? So is it that you're procrastinating a lot? You have a lot of escapism. You're not actually working on the things as much as you could. But then when you are working on them, you're crushing it. Because that's one way of not being super productive, is you're productive when you do work, but you don't work a lot because of procrastination, distractions, escapism, etc. Or is your issue more the opposite, where you don't really procrastinate that much? You actually work a pretty big part of your day, but you could be way more effective and productive in those hours where you are working, either by actually like moving your fingers and your head faster, or by working on things that have a higher reward per effort ratio. So just to sum it up, either we're not working enough, but we are productive when we do, or we are working all the time, but we're just not getting as much juice out of the work that we put in.
Mm.
I'd love for you to identify which one is your main issue with productivity right now, and then I feel like the path toward improving that becomes a little bit more clear once we know which one of those it is.
Well, Daniel, I want to say it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the show. Thank you again for sharing those incredible insights. And if the listeners wanted to get in touch with you to learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I've recently decided to step forward a little bit as my own personal brand. I've been for a very long time, we're talking almost a decade, been hiding around my company, behind company product, behind company website, all those things. I am actually making a new Instagram and TikTok and everything. Actually, like this week, as we're speaking with my team, we want to start a little bit from scratch, have a new angle, have a new kind of way of messaging. So anyway, if any of you wanted to be a part of that journey, you're going to be there from the very start. You can find me at I am Daniel Hauge on basically any social media. Yeah, there's going to be daily content on stuff like this. There's going to be high performance, energy optimization, productivity optimization, and everything in between. And yeah, you're very welcome. I would love for you guys to send me a DM or something and tell me you saw me on the prestigious initiative, or just say hi. That'd be awesome.
Awesome. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to work on your game and make every day count. Until next time, stay prestigious.